Little tweaks and giant wins. Consistently, time and time again. I've been working on me, making little tweaks. I'm on a winning streak, making little tweaks 1 inch at a time. Create giant wins, I know it because I'm living my best life, living better than good. Welcome to the podcast with Jill Underwood. This is another episode of Little Tweaks and Giant Wins.
Hey, everybody. It's Jill Underwood with Little Tweaks and Giant Wins. I am so stoked to have Paige White with me today. Paige and I met a number of years ago, and Paige does something amazing. Paige helps everybody with their credit scores, and she has a wealth of knowledge and information. So get out your notepad, get your pen, turn up the volume, and let's get started with Paige. Paige, welcome, honey. It's so good to see you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you having me on. And obviously, I know how much of a passion you have for helping other people. So that's a good connection for you and I, because we both have that same passion for it, being able to get people qualified for home loans. And just in general, helping people. But that's where our connection is for sure. So I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Give everybody a teeny bit about your background and how you got started and how you started your company. Give us a little bit of background.
Sure. So, well, the way back part of it is I was actually a client first, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that here in a minute. But so that's kind of how I ended up having knowledge about credit and how the system works and all that type of stuff, because when you have to go through it, you end up learning a lot pretty quick in that manner. So we started our company almost 2 years ago. December 2nd is our 2-year anniversary.
Oh, congrats.
And, yeah, well, thank you. We're a women-owned business, so there's 3 of us. And
congratulations.
well, thank you on that as well. So we've been in, like I said, since December. I worked with another credit repair company in the past, and decided to part ways and start something on our own. So I've been in the credit repair industry for about 8 years, and both of my business partners have been in the credit repair industry for about 10 years. So between the 3 of us, we have lots of knowledge. And the great part about us is that we all kind of specialize in different things. And so we put together our strengths to try to help out as many people as we can.
Outstanding. Okay,
so kind of a little bit about how we started.
Yeah, so tell me your story that you were a client first. Tell me more.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons why, not just that we're so successful, but that we have the passion that we have. So myself and one of my business partners, Jana Fox, and she and I were both clients. So that's kind of one of the credit myths that I was going to talk about today. A lot of times people think, well, you have bad credit because why don't you just pay your bills, right? I mean, it sounds pretty easy. Just pay your bills and you wouldn't have bad credit, except that's not really how life works for the majority of people, because we all know life happens to the best of us. And that's kind of what happened to me. So it was in 2008 and 9, and I know you've been in the mortgage industry for a minute. So we had the crash, and we ended up losing our house and cars, and ended up walking away. And we had little kids at this time. And so we ended up moving in for a short period of time with our in-laws. And we were actually homeless for about 6 months. And so the year after we lost our house, and again, kind of stayed on the basement floor of some people, my mom passed away the year later. And 7 months and 8 days after that, my dad passed away. And then the year after that, my daughter was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and she was in the hospital for almost about 5.5 weeks. So it would be fair to say I didn't care too much about my bills, right? I mean, I wasn't like super focused on that type of stuff. I was just trying to survive.
Bless your heart.
Well, I always say, don't feel bad for me. That's what helps me build character and made me a stronger, wiser person, and made everything that in my life now I appreciate much, much more because of where I've been, or when things get bad, I always think, well, they can't get a whole lot worse than they were. So I can build myself up from anything. And I trust in God to help me get where I need to go as well. But that's how I got into this industry, is because I couldn't, I probably should have filed bankruptcy because of all the debt I had, but I couldn't even afford a bankruptcy attorney at that time. I was just desperate. And so I actually reached out to Jana, my business partner, who was in the credit repair industry at the time. And she helped guide me and get me on track. And so one thing led to another, and here we are. So that's kind of one of the credit myths that I try to bust by saying, it's not lazy people that aren't paying their bills. Now, Jill, we know, both you and I know, there's plenty of lazy people out there that don't pay their bills.
No, no, no.
It's a shocker. But I will tell you, I'd say 85% of the people that we work with are really great people that had bumps in the road and need a hand up, not a hand out.
Yep.
They need somebody to educate them, teach them, and guide them. And then help at the same time, we can get some negative items removed. And then there are people that if they don't pay their bills, they'll get back in the same spot, but we'll still do what we can to help them.
You know, I see behind you on your board, there's a saying, I can't see the whole thing, but it ends with the word gratitude. And what I heard you say about your experience is that even during the bad times, and we all get shitty times in our life, we just do. Bad things happen to good people. And I contend that everybody that we meet, everybody who comes through, our life on a day in and day out basis, they are either just got out of something bad, or they're going through something bad right now, or if it's not those two, they're fixing to go through something really bad, right? And we have to learn the gratitude of that darkness. When we realize that we are in that bad place and we learn from it, that's really how we get through it.
Not even just how we get through it, how we become better because of it.
There it is.
And the experiences we go through are just that. They're there for us to learn. They're there for us to be better. I always used to tell my kids when they were little, something crappy would happen. I'll be like, well, what a great opportunity to build character. Isn't that
There
awesome?
it is. I love that.
Like, what is wrong with you? That is not a great opportunity to build character.
I love that. Okay, so talk to me about, here's something that I hear from my clients day in and day out, week after week after week. What happens when somebody does have great credit, everything's rocking right along, and they've lived in their same house for 8 years, and then suddenly, pow, an old medical bill that they never knew that they had shows up on their credit report. It's, $800 or $900, something they never knew was out there, and pow, it just tanked their credit score. I actually have that situation happening with one of my clients right now. What is that kind of, wow, something random and radical just hit your credit report? What do we do?
Well, so one thing to know, just as far as information is concerned, that 79% of people actually have errors on their credit report.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
and it can be something like that. Maybe the medical bill's not correct, or maybe it's just how it's reporting, or it was paid, or that's another factor, is that 80% of medical billing has errors. So if we're talking about medical collections in general, a lot of times people will contact me and say, I don't remember that, or I paid that, or insurance was supposed to pay it. Well, 80% of the time they're probably right, but it's on their credit report and they need to address it. So that's your question. What do we do? Well, so there's a couple of thought processes in that. So first off, they need to evaluate, is this really legitimate? Is this my collection? And so they can certainly contact the collection company and find out who the original creditor is, and try to do some investigative work on their end. And there are something called a debt buyer and a debt collector. So typically with medical collections, they are giving their debt to a debt collector. So the debt collector doesn't actually own the debt. They're just collecting on behalf of the doctor's office or a hospital. So on their own, an individual could contact the doctors, the original creditor, the doctor's office, and see if they can pay the doctor's office or hospital. If they do that, it's very important that they ask them within that payment that the doctor's office or hospital pull back the debt from the debt collector. Okay. They have that right to pull it back. It's very important, though, Jill, that they have a very clear conversation and understanding, because a lot of people will just go and pay the medical collection off to the collection company and think that's going to help them. Or they don't have a conversation with the doctor's office to pull it back, because normal people, Jill, with common sense would think, hey, I'll just pay this collection and be done with it. And it's mine. I just want to pay it, or I don't want to look at it anymore. Well, 9 times out of 10, if you pay your collection off, you'll actually drop your score. And that goes against all common sense, and it's unfair, but the credit bureaus don't recognize numbers when it comes to collections. They only recognize how many collections you have and the age of a collection. So what happens is, if you pay your collection off, you actually end up with a brand new $0 collection to the day you pay it. And then it stays on there another 7 years. And no collection company, like I said, will tell you, because otherwise you wouldn't pay it if you knew that. Right. So it's important when you're talking to that doctor's office or hospital that they make it in writing, or they make it clear on a recorded call that they'll pull it back. Okay. Now, that's what our company specializes in, obviously, is removing negative items off of the credit report. And ideally, we want to remove them without somebody paying them. So if somebody wants to try it on their own, they can. Again, be wary of how you say it and what you hear, and what kind of documentation you get. But they can certainly reach out to us, and we can try to get it removed for them as well.
Okay, that's valuable. And I want to just kind of linger here for a second, because you just taught me something. I was unaware of having the doctor's office pull back the debt from the debt collector. And I think that there's a lot of misconception out there, because a lot of these, let's call them radio personalities. A lot of what I think people hear is to have it to pay for removal. What's that phrase?
Pay to delete, which we do as well here in our
pay
office.
To delete. So maybe my misconception, based on what you just said, my misconception was that, okay, I'll pay it, but I need for you to delete it, from the credit bureau. But maybe that's not right, and it's asking the doctor's office to pull it back.
Well, so that's 2 parts. So you are correct, Jill. There is that pay to delete. Not every company will do a pay to delete. Some collection companies will flat out not do it, and they will only allow you to pay it and zero it out. Well, again, that's not helping your credit, so there's no value in paying it, as far as your credit scores are concerned. And some doctor's offices won't pull it back. So those are 2 completely separate things. So you might call a doctor's office and they will refuse to pull it back. Wow. But there also might be a doctor's office or hospital that actually sells the debt. So like Midland Funding is a debt buyer, Portfolio is a debt buyer. So once that debt is sold, you can't call the doctor's office or the hospital, because they don't own it anymore. Got it. But then you have to deal directly with the collection company, and some of them will do pay to deletes. I would say there's probably 10,000 different collection companies out there, and probably of those 10,000, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, but I'd say probably 25% of them do pay to delete, and the other 75% won't. So that's why it is important that if you're going to do it on your own, that you get something in writing stating they'll delete it. And if otherwise, what they do, Jill, is they say, absolutely, Miss Underwood, once you pay this debt, I will update your credit report. Well, they said update. They didn't say delete, but people hear what they want to hear. And then now they've updated it to a 0 balance and actually dropped your score. Wow. Isn't that interesting? Okay. So update me, if you would, on where somebody's credit score comes from. Sure. How is it determined? Because it used to be like, the 35% was the relationship of the credit extended to you, all that. So where does a score come from? So it isn't as an algorithm, of course. And
I
then,
love that word, algorithm. It's so cool. And but yet it's so vague because nobody
well,
knows the algorithm,
right,
right?
it is vague and nobody does know it except for FICO, Fair Isaac, right? They know it, they created it. And so it's kind of like a pie chart, like you kind of said, a percentage. Okay. So 35%, for instance, of your scores are going to be based on the amount you owe, how much
Right.
you owe. And so, for instance, with credit cards, those are revolving lines of credit. And that's going to be different than your installment line, which is a home loan, a auto loan, a student loan, a recreational loan, whatever those look like. So an installment line of credit, it doesn't matter what your balance is based on your limit, right? So if you got a $10,000 loan, if your balance can be 9,999, and that's not determining what your scores are, but revolving is going to be determined on that. So 35% of your score based on the amount you owe. So what that means is if you have a $500 limit credit card, then you're going to want to keep that balance low at all times. So anything that's a 0 to 30% balance per the limit. So if it's $500, 150 or less is going to be positive. It gives you points. A 30 to 50% balance, it doesn't really hurt you or help you. But then anytime you get over that 50%, so like 250, right, is 50% of 500. Anytime you go over that, you're actually going to drop your scores.
Got it.
And then I like to say anything over the limit's an atomic bomb.
It is.
So that's
very
the 30.
expensive.
Yeah. So, and you've seen it on credit reports, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the 35% amount owed. Okay. So then you have the 30%. I got my payment history. And so what that means is same thing, never having any late payments, having perfect payment history. Did you know, Jill, that one late payment can drop your score as much as 100 points overnight?
I have seen that happen. Yes. Yes. It's
And people think,
drastic.
it's just 30-day late. It's not that big of a
Mm-mm.
deal.
No, it's devastating.
It's devastating.
Yeah.
And it takes forever to recover.
Because isn't it just time? You've got to wait for time to pass, right?
Yeah. And so, and just thinking, that's affecting 30% of your scores. Now, each month that it gets older, it's going to hurt less and less.
Mm-hmm.
And the late payments really only affect you a lot for 2 years. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to affect you after the 3 years, whatever, but they're going to have the biggest impact in the first 2 years. So the older they get, the less they'll hurt you. If you do have one late payment, Jill, though, people should reach out to their creditors and ask for a one-time good faith removal of that late payment.
Okay.
I always try to tell people, try to call up to 3 different times on 3 different days and ask to speak to a supervisor, because you never know if somebody's in a good mood and they want to help you out that day. There are some companies that flat out will not do it. For instance, Capital One. No ifs, ands, or buts. So, but they should at least try and ask for that one-time good faith removal.
Yeah. You never know when you find somebody in a really good mood.
That's right.
Right.
We would do it for somebody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We want to help them out. So that is your payment history. So just think about what I just said. That's 65% of your scores.
Okay.
Payment
What's the other 35?
amount you owe.
Wait, 65, 30. What's the other 35%?
So then you're going to have 15% is going to be your length of history.
Okay.
So if you have a credit card that's 25 years old and you go and close it, you will plummet your score because you just lowered your length of history.
Interesting. Okay.
So, you should keep your credit cards open as long as you possibly can.
Okay.
And even if you're added on as an authorized user or something, make sure it's an older card. So whenever we have clients that have 0 credit established, we're asking them to go get credit, right? build credit. Well, it's going to take at least 6 months for any underwriter, for instance, to approve them because they have no length of history. They got to prove themselves. And so a lot of times, which is another kind of crazy thing that most people don't know, is you might get super excited that you pay your auto loan off, right? Yay, I paid off my auto. Nobody wants a car payment.
Right.
What they don't know is that you'll actually lower your score when you pay it off.
Yep.
So it's not like every week you're handing in this homework to your teacher every week and you're getting this good grade. Well, you pay it off. Now you no longer have this homework to turn in. And so
Yep.
you're no longer getting graded. So I doesn't mean I'm not encouraging people to pay off their autos and stuff like that, but you just have to be aware that it's really important to have a strong, thick, healthy credit profile to balance it out.
Yep.
So that's
I remember,
15%.
yeah. When my daughter, and insert a little story real quick. When my daughter was 18, I put her as an authorized user on a MasterCard. So, a major credit card. And I had this card, I don't know, 20, 25, 30 years. It's like the very first credit card I ever had in my whole life. I still have it.
Wow.
And
That's
so
awesome.
I put her on as an authorized user for the specific purpose of starting to build her credit. And then she got her own little credit card, $1,000 limit. And I think that really helped to propel her into getting a credit score going. And over time, her credit card aged, and then I took her off as an authorized user. So, but in the long run, now here we are 9 years later, 8 or 9 years later, she has a great credit score and established a few trade lines of her own.
That's
So
right.
was that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do?
Absolutely. It's authorized user cards are never going to weigh as much as your own because an authorized user card is just an indicator that somebody else knows how to pay their bills.
True.
But
Very
it
true.
can give you those points. So a lot of times, even if you had a client and your underwriters will approve authorized user cards, it can tweak them up a little bit here or there. But in the fact of what you did is actually what I believe all parents should do for their kids if they have credit cards established, to go ahead and add them on so they can have that base. So then their kids can go out and get their own credits. You did exactly the right thing, and the same thing I did for my daughter.
Outstanding. All right. So we've got 35% is the amount you owe. We've got 30% is your payment history. 15% is the length of your history. So let's see. Was that 70? What? No, 65. So it's 80.
Yep.
It's really late in the day for math,
So,
right? All right. So the last 20% that creates our credit score. Take us
so
home.
it's two parts. They both are weight 10% each. One is going to be what we call the negative 10%. And what I mean by that is that's the inquiries.
Okay.
So
Got it.
inquiries do account for 10% of your scores, but I always like to say, Jill, inquiries do not hurt you nearly as much as the internet would like for you to believe.
Right?
What I mean by that, and I'll use you as an example. How
Okay.
many people have come to you and you pull their credit and they think you drop their scores 50 points?
I will say I educate on that a lot.
Good.
I really, really do, because there are a lot of myths out there. Is a lot of misinformation. I usually also share that my one credit pull isn't going to make the difference, especially if you're at a 781 credit pull is not going to make a difference. Now, if you're a 640 and I pull your credit, and then you go over to Macy's and Macy's pulls your credit, and then you decide you might want to buy a car and you go to a couple car dealers, that's going to hurt your score. Is that
Right.
still accurate?
Well, it is accurate, but I'm glad you educate, because there's a lot of people that get really upset at their lenders and think their lenders dropped their score 50 points from pulling a mortgage. It didn't
No,
happen.
not even.
It's based on your overall credit profile. So that goes to what you just said. If you have a really strong, thick, healthy credit profile and you get an inquiry, you're barely going to see anything.
You won't even notice. Yep.
Yeah, if it's a weak, thin credit profile, then yes, it is going to be affected a little bit more. But even at that, it's not, unless you go out and get a car, like you said. Let's say you go to 3 car dealerships in one day, and each car dealership pulls your credit through 15 different lenders. Now you have 45 inquiries. Yes, your score is going to take a
Yeah.
huge hit.
Yes.
So that's why it's important to you limit those inquiries when you go to car dealerships. And then inquiries really only affect you for 2 years. So the older those get, the less and less they hurt as well. And then they fall off. And you can have 10 inquiries in a 12-month period, Jill, and they don't negatively affect you. Everybody has that right to shop.
Right. Okay. And even when I pull a report for a mortgage loan, it only shows the inquiries in the past 4 months. It's only the past 120 days. So I know I'll have a lot of clients that will tell me, oh, I had this inquiry. It was, about a year ago. And it doesn't even show up for me.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Very good. All right.
Okay.
And then the last 10% is your type of credit. And that goes back to, again, what we just mentioned, building that nice, strong, thick, healthy credit profile. So, for anybody that comes to us and is a new client, we're going to usually recommend they get 2 credit cards, secured or not secured, depending on where their credit is, and a credit builder loan. So down the road, though, if I were to guide somebody to try to get into that 700 range and, way down the road 800s, which is pretty elusive, then to have 3 to 5 credit cards and 1 to 3 installment lines of credit. So you don't want to go out and have 20 credit cards either, because then you're a risk and that'll actually hurt you. But having, 5 credit cards is nice, strong credit profile. Anytime you have a credit line increase, you should take it. Obviously it helps you keep your balances low as well, but that's that at last 10%. And so we're never going to tell somebody to go out and get 5 credit cards right away, but just building up to that. So one day you can have the credit scores you want. So that's 100%.
I love that. That's a great info. All right. Let me ask you this, Paige. So what is something in the credit score world that you see time and time again that is just maddening to you? Is there something that is just pops up on people's credit, or creditors that just are just slimy? What is it that happens over and over again that you're just like, not again. It's so wrong.
Well, there's a couple that are very frustrating. I always feel bad for people. Typically, it's going to be a phone carrier or a cable company.
Okay.
Those are really bad because a lot of people, let's say they moved and they shut off their service and they took their box in for their cable, right? Well, the cable company claims they never received the box, and then now you have this collection on your credit report and you cannot prove that you took the box in.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty common. So I even remember my first time my daughter moved out of her apartment. I told her, when you take your box in, you need to get a handwritten signature of who it is that returned it, saying box is returned, 0 balance. I said, you can take a picture of the person. I don't care. But we see that happen time and time again. And it's just their word against the cable company. Yeah. And so we have to kind of fight that. Also with cell phone companies, they say, okay, you switch over to us, we'll pay this certain amount. We'll credit the other account. And so then they end up with a collection from a phone company. The last thing that we see, and I always feel really bad, and a lot of times we'll even encourage our attorneys to get involved in this, is when people move out. So if they broke their lease early, or they had to get their carpets cleaned and then they charge them an exponential amount. So let's say you got your carpets cleaned, but the carpets were 20 years old, and then they try to charge you the full price of the carpet. It doesn't work like that. I mean, that's not legal. They were already going to have to replace them because they're 20 years old. So they can just, there may be, if there's damage done, they may have to pay a small percentage, but not the whole amount. So we see that happen all the time as well.
Wow. Interesting. Okay, so let me ask you this, my dear. I see a lot of this these days where people are self-reporting. They are self-reporting on their credit bureaus, their cell phone or their utility or something like that. And of course, that's an expensive living. So we don't count that in anybody's debt to income ratio. But I see that, and I don't know where that came from. I don't know why people do that. Does that affect your score in a positive way? What is the strategy behind somebody saying, okay, I'm going to report my utilities to the credit bureau?
Well, I don't know if it's the self-reporting is what's happening, or Experian Boost is what's taking
Oh,
place. So you may have seen advertisements on TV for that Experian Boost. Two things, well, a couple things about it. One is, well, we don't recommend it. Um, First off, when you do Experience Boost, most people don't know that when you sign up, you are literally giving Experian your banking login information.
oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, they are logging in as if they are you.
Oh, wow.
And that's a very scary thing, in my opinion.
Uh, Totally.
Plus, they're selling your information. That's what they're doing, is they're tracking what you're spending your money on. Yes, they're going to report the cable and the phone bill and the water bill. They are reporting that, so that is giving Experian a boost. But you are giving them that information, and it only helps Experian. So I don't know if that's worth it for somebody to do that, and it depends on how thin your credit profile is. If you have a really thin credit profile, then it might be worth it for you to do it. But if you have a strong, thick, healthy credit profile, it's not going to really help you anyway. But the other thing that's important, Jill, is that it doesn't help in your mortgage pull.
Correct.
So you use versions 2, 4, and 5 for your mortgage FICO scores, and it doesn't calculate into those. Now, it does calculate into an 8 or a 9, which is what your credit card companies or your auto loan auto dealerships will use. So that might be the positive of it, is that I don't have a credit card, so I'm going to go get Experian Boost, which will help your experience. So if you apply for a credit card, it'll look a little bit better. But that's just a personal decision. Again, we don't personally recommend it because of what it does to them selling your information and you giving their banking information. But that's what you're seeing.
Wow. Okay. You just said something that was really interesting. You called it, like, when I pull as a mortgage lender, you said a version 2, 4, or 5.
Mhm.
Whereas if you go to a car dealer, they're pulling your credit at a version 8 or 9. I've always described that as a different algorithm. And I want to talk about this for a little bit, because when somebody sees their credit score through their credit card, through their Discover or their Capital One, or if they subscribe to Credit Karma or any of those, whatever those services tell my client that their score is, when I pull it, it's not even remotely close. It's just not even close. And when a client comes to me and says, well, because I always ask people before I pull their credit, I always ask, what do you think your credit score is these days?
Sure.
And they will say, oh, well, Credit Karma says this, or I bought a car 2 or 3 months ago and they told me I had a 900, or some great number. But I find that when I pull the credit score, it appears to be a more strict algorithm. So is that what you're mentioning with the different version? And can
Mhm.
you back me up on the fact that I have a stricter algorithm? It's just I get a lower score when I pull it
Well,
from
first
as a
off,
mortgage lender.
yeah, you're 100% right. You do have a much stricter algorithm, because you got to remember, this is like the biggest purchase that most people
It's a
make, right?
bigger debt.
So
Yes.
they're taking everything possible and going through it with a fine tooth comb and making sure all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. And it is graded with a much stricter algorithm.
Yep.
So when a credit card company pulls, they're pulling with an algorithm that focuses more on credit cards. And the auto industry is focusing more on auto loans in the past. So, well, the other crazy thing is, and that goes back to what you're saying, when let's say they say, well, Discover says I have this FICO score, Capital One says I have this FICO score. Well, there's 56 versions, the last we knew of.
Really?
That doesn't mean it's 1 through 56, but like versions 8 and 9 might have 10 versions each, because there's really only 10 versions. And then there's FICO 10 and there's FICO 10T, which is trended data. And that's one of the things they're trying to go to. They're trying to talk the
Are they
government.
still talking about that? That
Huh?
whole trending? Didn't they try that once before, the whole trending thing? And it didn't work very good. Sorry, I've got a really loud motorcycle behind me right now. Did you hear that? Okay, that was super fun.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, back to you.
But even Jill, on versions 2, 4, and 5, there's more than one version of those. But the thing is that the mortgage industry still uses the original versions, because the government comes in and says, or FICO, if you will, comes in and says, hey, we've got this great new version. Do you remember years ago when they were talking about how medical collections would not affect you the same and wouldn't hurt you the same in the mortgage industry? And all the lenders got super excited and people were excited. Yes. Well, that's really how it should be, because you shouldn't get punished for something you had no control over. But the mortgage industry didn't adopt it. And if they don't adopt that version, it doesn't matter how many versions you write.
Interesting.
So that's what those are coming from. Then going to credit monitoring sites, that is a whole nother thing, because that is called a Vantage score.
Okay.
So that is not even the same algorithm as a FICO. It's a completely separate algorithm.
Right.
And so it's graded differently. And I would say, for as long as I've been in the industry, that your Vantage scores are on average about 40 points higher than your FICO.
That sounds about right. That's about what I see.
Now, I've seen it both ways. My husband, a few years back, applied for a loan, and his Credit Karma was actually lower than his FICO. So I have seen it both ways. I've seen it 100 points higher. I've seen 100 points lower. But I would say on average, a Vantage is about 40 points higher. So if you go to your Credit Karma and you have a 640, you probably have about a 600.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if they self rate, or give you information and say I'm a 650, then okay, where did you get that from, and then go from there. Because even if they said I just purchased a car 2 weeks ago and I was a 640, okay, well, that algorithm is closer, but it's still probably 10 points off, maybe 15 points, because they're grading differently and yours is more strict.
Yeah. And not to mention the fact that they probably have a new debt associated with it too, because won't that new debt also drop their score for a little bit until it ages?
Correct. Yes, because that goes back into that 15% of length of history. Now you have this new loan, so you're going to take a bump for a minute now after it gets older, and it'll shift.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this. I got a couple more, I think, good solid questions. So the credit reports these days have such detailed information. I mean, they know where I work and where I lived and when I lived there. And if I ever had a P.O. box, they've got that listed on there too. And where does do the credit reports get all of that information on my jobs? Like, how do they determine? And is salary part of the credit scoring model in some way? Like, can they determine if you're overly indebted based on your income and your debts?
I mean, the answer to that is ideally yes, because when you apply for credit cards, you do tell them how much you make. And then I'm sure when you, sometimes you'll be given a new offer. Hey, there's a new offer. Do you want to update your income, right? So, or do you want to update your income so you can see what the new offer is? So they do know what that is. It's not based on your credit score though. So your algorithm is not based on your income. But yes, a credit card company, when you're applying for something or when you're applying for a loan, will take your income into consideration, because same with you, when you apply, right? You have to have a certain debt to income ratio. If I make, but husband and I make $100,000 a year and I'm trying to get a $300,000 house, that's going to be you know, you gotta,
Yeah.
well, it's not horrible, but you
That
can't have
actually
3 car
works.
payments and a student loan and 5 credit
Yeah.
cards. So, you know, you have to kind of, that's all based on the same idea and the same principle.
Okay. Now, for many years, we've all been advised to go to annualcreditreport.com
Mhm.
3 different times during the year and see what's on there. Give me the update on that. Is that still relevant for folks to do? And does that give someone like a real-time credit score? How do we monitor as consumers? How do we monitor what's on our credit reports? What's the best methodology for that?
So great question. So everybody should have some sort of credit monitoring site. And if you don't want to pay for one, Credit Karma's fine. It does only have 2 of the 3 credit bureaus. So you're not getting a full picture, but at least it gives you kind of an idea of what's going on. It's important to know, though, that Credit Karma and almost all credit monitoring sites are owned by the credit bureaus. So
There
Credit
it
Karma
is.
is owned by TransUnion.
Okay. So the credit monitoring sites are owned by the credit bureaus. Let's just highlight that for a minute. Okay. Back to you.
So when you go to Credit Karma and they have all these great suggestions for you, believe me, that's the benefit of TransUnion and all the people that they sell your information to. Because they're the ones that are giving you the information, which is ultimately going to benefit them. It's all a power money grab when it comes to the credit bureaus. They're not there to help you. They make money. The worse our credit scores are as a society, Jill, the more money big banks make. So they're never going to help us. And if you haven't figured it out already, big banks own the world. So it's our responsibility to educate, and so that's what we take a lot of pride in. So going back to having a credit monitoring site, super important. Just know, you know, the education and the information they give you may not be great. Do not pay attention to the scores per se. You can use it as a starting point or a basis, but you're really just paying attention to, are there any, is there any fraud or identity issues, or what are these alerts that I don't know what's going on, or somebody applying for credit? So it's your ability to be able to track that type of stuff. So it is important to have a credit monitoring site. Now, going back to what you asked with annual credit report. So there's 2 parts to that. So first off, annual credit report is a very detailed credit report, and it is supposed to be accurate. The reason why I say supposed to be is because they don't report accurately. There's something called Metro 2, which is their standard of the way they're supposed to report. They're all supposed to report the same exact thing. And if you look at anybody's annual credit report, you will see that it's not all the same. So that's one of our strategies that we use, is to be able to use those against them to show them that they're not reporting according to their own standards. But with
Oh,
that
wow.
being said, annual credit report annually. That was before the rule that you could do it 1 time a year for free. And you can pay for it if you wanted it multiple times, but 1 time a year for free. But since COVID, until April of 2022, you're supposed to be able to get 1 new credit report a week
Really?
for no extra cost. It
Wow.
doesn't always work that way. I have lots of clients that we ask them to go get it, and they say they can't get one, or they have to send in more information. I don't think they don't like sending these reports out because it costs them more money. So they try to make it very difficult, but you have to pay for the credit scores. And so also, I don't know what version of FICO you're getting. It is a FICO score, but it's not going to be the same versions you use. You're the only ones that pull 2, 4, and 5 are mortgage lenders. But it's a great resource. I recommend everybody get annual credit report. If you can get it once a month right now, take advantage of it. But when it goes back to annually, if it does go back to once a year, then just do it once a year, but always have a credit monitoring site.
Got it.
You can put fraud alerts on your account as well. There's something called a freeze. I definitely don't recommend a freeze unless there's actual identity theft.
Okay, because that was my next question, because I pull a lot of reports and they have a freeze and I have to have them unfreeze it. So what is the strategy why somebody would, and you said don't do it unless. What is that unless?
Well, the only reason why I say don't do it is if you put your account on freeze, they give you a PIN.
Okay.
You lose that PIN number, prepare for a nightmare.
You're toast.
Prepare for a nightmare to get that unfrozen.
Got it.
So a fraud alert is good because then you're going to get any type of activity. If somebody pulls an application or whatever, you'll get an immediate alert, and that's the fraud alert, and that's quite fine. That'll protect you. The freeze will actually keep even you from applying. So nobody can apply. Nobody has access to your credit at all. So if you were to pull somebody's credit with the freeze, you are not going to get the proper scores.
Right. We get zero information.
Right.
It's literally nothing. It's a
Right.
blank report that says this is frozen.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
exactly.
So I wrote as you were talking, I wrote down this question. How do we clean this up? You kind of chuckled a little bit at the number of things that are wrong. You said that 79% of people have errors on their credit report. 80% of medical billing has errors. And they sell your information. How do we clean this up? Can we?
Well, well,
Can we
if
can we all
the
hold
first,
hands together and
right?
lock arms and go against the big credit bureaus so that they
Yeah,
can
well,
clean this up?
there are agencies out there that are supposed to help us, like the FCRA and the FDCPA, and we try to use them to help our clients with as well as the CFPB with the Consumer Protection Financial Bureau. So we try to use them, and that's kind of what our company does to back us. We work together with attorneys to fight any FCRA or any FDCPA violations. We're looking for those violations, if you will. So the first step is to have that credit monitoring at all times so that you can be ahead of the game if there are little things like your client didn't know that thing was coming on their credit report and they didn't know what it was. So it's just good to have that. But as far as like repairing, that's what we take pride in, is getting as many negative items removed off of our clients' reports as we can, but also, Jill, the education aspect. Obviously, that's why I came on here. I love doing that.
Yeah.
It's my responsibility as a prior client to teach as many people as I can. So I do love having that opportunity to do that. Because if somebody comes to us, we're going to do our part, right? And we're going to try to remove as much as we can, but they have to do their part, and we try to hold them accountable and responsible. So we put a game plan together for them. Okay, client, there's 10 items that we're going to try to remove, but you don't have any credit established. So you're going to need to do A, B, and C. You're going to have to wait this amount of time. You're going to have to be patient. If they do their part, we do our part, then we're going to come together at whatever time frame that looks like for them, because everybody's different. But we'll get them in the position to qualify. I always say there's nobody we can't help, but everybody does take a different time frame and path. I don't want to say everybody can be helped. If you have somebody that had a late payment on their mortgage last month, I can't help them.
Right.
Time is the healer,
Yeah.
but we can educate them on, hey, you're going to have to wait a year, do all these things.
Yeah.
Or if they have $100,000 in credit card debt and they just stopped paying yesterday and they have no intention to pay, I can't help them. I can guide you. I can send you to a budgeting coach. We partner with the budgeting coach. There are times that we do recommend bankruptcy. I'm never a cheerleader of bankruptcy. I will never be one that tells somebody it's great. It's not great, but it's there for a reason. And people do need it sometimes. And so we'll tell some people, you know what, you're better off doing this. And then we recommend, hey, if you're going to do it, do a 7, maybe not a 13. So that's, there's a lot of aspects, but we take the first picture and go from there as far as the education and the game plan.
Wow. You are such a wealth of knowledge and information. I learned something here with you today. Tell the entire world where they can find you and your amazing company.
Well, first off, thank you for that. And I could probably talk about credit for hours and hours and hours.
I
And
know, me too, right?
yeah, you blow people's minds the more you tell them, and they think, "How is that possible?" Well, I know it's very frustrating. But yeah, so we are. Our website is rescoreyourlife.com. rescoreyourlife.com. And we have a great YouTube page. We're fairly new. We've been in business, like I said, almost 2 years, so it's growing, but it's Rescore Your Life on YouTube. And there's some videos on there. It talks about kids in credit, inquiries, collections, debt consolidation. So there's a bunch of videos on there. Our main line is 816-683-2900. And then my personal email address is Paige W, and that's PAIGEW at rescoreyourlife.com. But there's also info at rescoreyourlife.com if you just wanted a general question. And anytime, any questions I can answer for anybody, I think you guys have all figured it out. I love talking about it. So feel free anybody can reach out with questions.
I love it. And you've got a really good Facebook page too.
Yeah, we try to put some funny memes on there. We've got some blogs, a little education. Most of it is just try to be inspirational and to be kind of a light in somebody's day.
You know what? There it is. We're going to end on that because, yes, we need to be a bright light and shine every day on our world, right?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you again, Paige, so much for being here. You have given us a lot of great nuggets of information, and I want everybody to, if you have questions, reach out to Paige. Reach out to me if you have any questions as well. Rescoreyourlife.com. Paige White, you have been an absolute jewel today. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
I appreciate you, Jill.
Ditto, girlfriend. All right. And so that concludes another episode of Little Tweaks, Giant Wins. So make sure that you tweak your credit report and monitor it so that you can have giant financial wins in your life.
Amen.
All right. Take care, everybody. Love you, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Bye bye.